This example, we are going to be looking at the same information for Hickory Company that we looked at in brief exercise 819, but we're going to change one element, and that element is now going to be complementary effects. And when we're talking about complementary effects, it means that by dropping one segment of our business, it's going to have an effect on other segments of our business. So when that happens, we can't just look at one segment by itself like we did in brief exercise 819. We actually have to look at the company as a whole and how that's going to affect us moving forward. So if we look at the information provided, it tells us that using the information for Hickory Company on the previous page, again, the relevant fixed costs are the 80% of the Parquet's machine rent and all of the Parquet's supervision salaries. In addition, it says to assume that by dropping the Parquet product line, it would also reduce our sales of the strip line by 10% and the plank line by 5%. And it tells us that all of their information remains the same. So if they drop the Parquet line, they want us to calculate what our new contribution margin would be for both the strip line and the plank line, and which alternative is now more cost effective and by how much. So when we're looking at this, again, here's the information for our three segments and our company as a whole. So the first thing that they want us to do is calculate what's going to happen if in fact we drop that Parquet line. What is it going to do to the contribution margins for both our strip and plank? They tell us that our strip line would drop by 10% in terms of sales and our plank would drop by 5%. Remember, if our sales go down, so do our variable expenses, because our variable expenses are based on how much revenue is being generated. So if I don't have to create as many products, I don't need as much direct materials as labor, variable overhead, selling expenses, all of those types of things. So to make things nice and easy, we can take for our strip line the new contribution margin. Our existing contribution margin, if we don't do anything with the Parquet line, is $175,000. And it says that our overall sales, which means our overall variable expenses, which means our overall contribution margin for strip, will drop by 10%. So that means we'll only have 90% of that value, or in total, $157,500. For the plank line, our new contribution margin. Currently, our contribution margin, if all three product lines exist, is at $80,000, but they said that our sales would drop by 5%, which means our variable expenses would drop by 5%, and therefore our contribution margin would drop by 5%, leaving us with 95% of that value, or in total $76,000. So if we were to drop our Parquet line, that means the contribution margin for the company would drop to $233,500. So in this example, since we are dealing with complementary effects, I can't just look at what the effect is on the Parquet line. I have to look at the company in total. So our contribution margin, if I keep all three of my product lines, that means I'm going to have $305,000 in total, which we see right here, for contribution. My strip and plank line are not affected. They're not going to drop at all. And we still have our Parquet flooring line. If we drop it, however, we get rid of our Parquet contribution margin of $50,000, and we know that the strip line will go down 10% and our plank line will go down 5%. So that means our new contribution margin, which we calculated over here, would be that $233,500. We then have to look at those expenses. So we have our machine rent. If we do nothing and we keep all three product lines, we're going to have to pay $75,000 in machine rent, which again you see right over here. If we drop it, we only have to pay 20% of that parquet flooring line. Remember, they told us that 80% of it is relevant, which means that 80% or 40,000 of that machine rent will go away if we drop that parquet line, and 20% or 10,000 will remain. So if we have to drop it, we'd still have the 5,000 that we have to pay for the strip, 20,000 that we have to pay for plank, and there still would be 10,000 associated with the parquet line that we can't get rid of yet. Maybe it's a lease that we have for the next year that we're going to have to pay regardless if we have that parquet line or not. So we'd only have to pay $35,000 in machine rent. Supervisor, so our supervision cost. If we keep all products, that means we keep all of our supervisors, and in total we have $45,000 in supervisor salaries, which we see here. They tell us, though, that all of the supervision for the parquet line is relevant, meaning if we get rid of that parquet line, we're going to get rid of that supervisor that is currently working for that parquet line, and therefore we don't have to pay $20,000 for their salary. So if we drop that parquet line, we only have to pay the $15,000 for the strip and the $10,000 for the plank supervisor, or in total $25,000. So if we add these components up, we sum them up, it tells us that if we keep all three lines, our total segment margin for our company will be at $185,000. But if we drop just the parquet line, our overall segment margin for our business drops to $173,500. So that means by dropping that parquet line, our company is going to lose out on $11,500. What we would save by dropping the parquet line, meaning the $40,000 in machine rent and the $20,000 in supervisor salaries, does not make up for what we'd have to sacrifice, which would be the $50,000 in contribution margin for the parquet flooring, the 5% that we'd be giving up in contribution margin for the plank line, and the 10% that we'd be giving up for the contribution for the strip line. So our decision in this case should be to keep that parquet line, because the effects that it has throughout the entire business is going to cause the company to have a segment margin of $11,500 less than if they actually kept that product line.